Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I'm here today to recap all of the knit and crochet blanks that we dyed in the first dyeing live stream of the Sock Blank Special 2, when we dyed all of these blanks in a variety of random patterns. I dyed some of these blanks with paler colors specifically so we could use them in the stamping and stenciling live stream to sort of have the negative space not always be white when I'm not dyeing the entire blank. These 6 blanks feature a combination of Knit Picks stroll fingering double-stranded blanks and homemade knit and crochet blanks that I'm either made by hand or on a knitting machine. If you would like to dye some of the Knit Picks stroll blanks on your own, you can see a link to that in this video description. I dyed these 3 Knit Picks stroll fingering blanks in 3 very different types of random patterns. These double knit blanks contain 2 strands of stroll fingering weight yarn knit together, and so it is a 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon blend. So that way when we unravel these blanks to make something out of the yarn, we will end up with 2 identical 50-gram skeins of yarn. A knit blank is purely a piece of fabric that you dye with the intention of unraveling it to make another project. Since knit blanks are fabric and I love tie-dyeing t-shirts, I thought it would be fun to fold and twist one of these blanks into sort of a classic spiral and apply food coloring dyes in a squeeze bottle to try to get a spiral shape. You can see that the resulting fabric does not really give you a spiral, but we definitely feel tie-dyed. I also really like how symmetrical the pattern is because I folded the blank in half first, lengthwise, before I tried to wind it into the spiral. I did all of the folding and twisting while the blank was dry, and then I pre-soaked the entire spiral in some water, in some tap water that had 3 tablespoons of white vinegar in it. So that way once we added the food coloring, the acid would help the colors bind. When I was done applying the dye, I steamed the blank in a steamer pot for 20 minutes, and that was sufficient to give us these really bright, vibrant tones. The 3 colors that we used were Wilton's Creamy Peach, Violet, and Teal. And in all the cases, you can see a tiny bit of the way the colors break. Around the violet, you can see the little bit of a blue halo. With the creamy peach, you see the pinker orange with a less, the more yellow orange halo. And in the teal, you also see a tiny bit of the blue halo. I haven't decided yet if I am going to try to stamp or stencil onto this blank in the live stream on Wednesday. But I know that it'll be fun when we unravel it, whether or not we over dye it in any kind of way. I mentioned that I wanted to sort of dye some backdrops to do some stancing and stenciling. I scrunched up this blank with some really low level of water in a pot, and I added 3 different colors that each contained 2 to 3 drops of food coloring from the Wilton Color-Right color performance system. I thought that this would help me get, a pretty cool pastel backdrop, and since it was scrunched up, I expected there to be some variation. What I did not expect is that we were going to get this stunning colorway that is really reminiscent of water. At one end, we started with what I think was just a handful of drops of black food coloring, a mixture of black and blue, and then at the end a mixture of blue and pink. And in all of these cases you can see that the colors broke to give us multiple tones in these sections. And there's no way I would over dye this yarn because I think it's absolutely breathtaking. And I really want to try playing around with this technique more in the future. This also shows just how potent the drops of food coloring are from the Color-Right color performance system. I am really excited to play around more with that, and if you want to learn more, there's a link to that food coloring in the video description. I still needed a non-pastel backdrop for stamping or stenciling. I took a pre-soaked blank and dip dyed it in a dye pot that had greater than 8 cups of water and at least 2 tablespoons of white vinegar. And I added to that, I think, 3 or 4 drops of the Color Right black food coloring. And then while this blank was still sort of folded into thirds, I dip dyed it into the pot. It was not an even dip dye, but I really just wanted to get some variation of the color. So that way I would have when I had negative space from the stenciling, I would have something non-white, and to help give a little more interest to that project when I unraveled it. But I think that this yarn is also really, really pretty. And I would totally be satisfied with this as a blank for its own right. And so I think that you can do a lot of fun when you're playing around with pastels. This is a flat single-stranded blank that I knit on my Loops and Threads knitting machine. The yarn base is Wool of the Andes worsted weight yarn, which is just 100% wool. I folded this blank in half lengthwise and then scrunched it up in sort of a random crinkle that I secured with rubber bands. I then submerged one side of this blank into a green mixture that was, I believe, 1 drop of blue food coloring and 1 drop of orange food coloring, letting a portion of the yarn soak up that green. Then I added 1 drop of brown food coloring into the pot and added the other side of the yarn to give us these tan and green specks and even some plain white over the entire blank. Because of the way the blank was folded in half, we do see more of the brown on the right hand side and more of the green on the left hand side, giving us a gradient before we even apply any colors with our stenciling and stamping techniques that we plan to try on this blank. Once again, I think that there's really no need to modify this blank. I just wanted to have something with a little less white space, and I know that there will be a lot of negative space left behind once I've played around with my stamping and stenciling. I made this crochet blank with a size K hook and bulky yarn. This was Knit Picks Big O yarn, which is 50% superwash merino, 50% nylon. And you can see that it took the food coloring colors really, really beautifully, as I used a needle nose squeeze bottle to apply the color to this blank in a really, really random pattern. I wanted to try to do some color blocking, so that way as I unraveled the yarn there would be, say, more green in one section and more orange in another. So that way, while the patterns will unravel in a really random, variegated way, there will still be some overall asymmetry to the final yarn. The wrong side of the blank is really cool, and it sort of gives a really big feel of how some of these colors were breaking. After I applied all of the colors, I pressed the fibers so that way they would spread out and blend a little bit. But you can see that some of the red struck first, and then we got some more halos. And so that's why we see more of the red and pinks on the right side than we do on the wrong side. I love the blue halo that we got from around where we added some of the deep, deep blue. We mixed a blue with red and pink, and it ends up, we got this gorgeous, gorgeous breaking sort of in these petals of the heart. Finally, I took a really long, skinny, single-stranded blank that I made on a Singer knitting machine and tied knots down the length to give some resist. So as I was dip dyeing it, we would get a little more variation within our gradient. I intended to dip one side into teal and then the other side into some Wilton's brown, but there ended up being so much teal in the pot that I sort of just went and just did a broken Wilton's teal gradient over the length. It's a little hard to get a good read on the tone, but the top end is what went into the dye bath first. And as you dip into Wilton's teal, you get a yarn that has less yellow and a lot more blue in it, giving us more of these bright blues down at the bottom end. What you also will notice is that the knots towards the end of the yarn had a greater impact on the color because there was less food coloring in there overall, so we ended up with some nice, fun, pale blue patches in addition to the bright blue that we have at the end. Looking at this blank laid out flat, you can see that there are many, many mistakes in the blank. There were dropped stitches and things like that. But since we plan to unravel this blank so it could turn into a hat or cowl or really anything you could think of, these mistakes don't really matter as long as the yarn is intact and we can unravel it. Here is the wrong side of what I showed of all of these blanks during this recap, just so you can see that there is really good color penetration through the entire blank. Sometimes in some of the techniques I do, you end up with a lot more color on the top of a blank than the bottom, and so then you know you're going to get some really, really cool specks when you unravel it. You will still get speckling from some of these blanks, especially the tie-dyed spiral blank, but in some cases it can be a lot more subtle because the specks come from where the yarn lies on top of each other in the knit or crochet fabric work. So I really look forward to unraveling all of these blanks, and I plan to do that in a live stream at some point in the future. Some of these blanks will make an appearance in the stamping and stenciling live stream, so make sure you check that out to see some more really, really fun dyeing adventures. The archive of that new stream should be available once this video has come out. Make sure you check the video description for links to some of the products that I mentioned in this video and links to other videos that were involved in the making of these blanks. Thank you so much for watching this recap. I hope that you are having as much fun dyeing blanks during this ChemKnits dye-along as I am having making them. Thanks for watching and happy dyeing!